airfields to take over those 3 airfields and deny the Indian Air Force. Most of them, it was a disaster. Most of them were caught as POWs. The only ones to escape, he rose to be a senior officer later on. He thought like a special force and actually hijacked an Indian jeep and drove back to Pakistan. Soviet-Afghan war was irregular warfare in its best of training people across, and I think they trained and supported by the Americans, they did that role to the hilt. But in any battle that they got on in a conventional thing, like for example against the Soviet airborne forces in one particular case, they had 200 own casualties against only 6 of the Soviets. So there are cases where they have not been employed with very good thinking. 1980, the SSG took on the anti-terrorist role, as also Siachen operations, which continued. 1999, we'll have to agree, Kargil infiltration was tactically brilliant. They could do that, but what had they thought beyond that? What was the Kargil intended to, and that's where I will be coming to, that Pakistan does these short-sighted tactical things very well, but is not able to back it with sound strategic thinking. They have an element in the Pakistan Air Force called the Special Services Wing, which was revived in 1999. It was there in 1971. Modeled on the US Air Force's first Special Operations Wing Unit and the US Army's Rangers, approximate force of 1,000 to 1,400 men. They can undertake all those tasks essentially against enemy Air Force related targets, but some sabotage action also. The SSGN, which was brought out by one of the speakers who trained the famous 2611 attackers, they come, this is again, I cannot verify this, come under Pakistan Special Operations Command. I am not really sure about it, and I would be glad if somebody can throw light on that. The concept and objectives, etc., is very similar to Navy SEALs, and they have been deployed in a wide variety of missions, including direct action and special reconnaissance operations, unconventional warfare, which was demonstrated in 2611, foreign internal defense, hostage rescue, counter-terrorism, and other missions. The roles are predominantly focused on the littoral and riverine domain, but of course they are capable of a whole lot of things, including supporting amphibious operations. Some noteworthy issues. History shows right from the day Pakistan became independence and the Kashmir issue that came up, no hesitation in using special forces or irregular methods. Tactical surprise is a fort, but subsequent employment, questions. Asymmetric actions have had initial tactical success almost every time, but never supported by sound strategic thought. There is extensive use in ongoing counter-terrorism effort all over Pak. In every operation, whether it is the Lal Masjid or that famous police academy case, it was the SSG and they came out with flying colors. Repercussions aside, but they've done well. There have been hijacking cases, the Pan Am case in 73 and another one in 90s, where they were successful. So on ground, the 20% that you talked of, the guns, are pretty okay. But I have this comment, again, it's a personal comment. And they need to get out of this mindset. So special forces, okay, they need to think soundly. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the panel and me, we are all open to questions.
Internal situations, to deal with internal situations, let's say counter-terrorism, or for that matter, internal strife within areas such as Tibet or the or Xinjiang.
While on paper, they clearly claim that the tiny PLA counter-terrorism effort, whatever exercises they have done with Tajikistan and with other countries, including Russia, all scenarios are outside into, counter-terrorism action. But it goes without saying, knowing the regime and the PLA and the equation that is there, there is no doubt that if they have a problem in Tibet, Xinjiang, all the forces, including the PLA's 15th Airborne Corps, will be used. But the Chinese are wise, unlike the Pakistanis. They would have devised something else before they do that openly. Otherwise, the police and the people's armed police, they are fully geared to take on anti-terror and counter-terror operations, and they're quite modernized. They have the latest equipment. So if you just ask me a personal view, they will use it if the requirement is there. In terms of the will to use, there's no doubt. I hope that answers that.
I've got a question for General Sabharwal, if you mind. You had mentioned that principle of hot pursuit must be followed. In our context, do you visualize any implications of this statement?
This is a political decision which I think should have been taken first time terrorism started. The terrorism started in 1983. And now it's so old that nobody's prepared to take that decision. But all over the world, wherever terrorists come in, you pursue them in a hot pursuit. And the implication of those will be at the moment if they do it, perhaps they may react because everybody knows about it. But we should have done this long before.
Sorry, I am saying that in our present context, is it possible to follow this, what is being advocated, principle of hot pursuit?
Well, you can take them. I know of an instance where Pakistanis came and killed about 30-odd people. The orders came, pay them in the same price. Within a week, they were paid in the same price with no publicity whatsoever. It was done. It is a political decision, and then it has to be done once the political bosses give you the go-ahead, it can be done.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Colonel Dabas, Narendra Dabas. A small observation on the point given by General Sabharwal. He said the NSG operation should be controlled by the Special Forces man. There is IG operations and training, sir. He is from the army. And we got 52% component there, which is totally operations and training is controlled by the army itself, sir. And incidentally, today there is a Special Forces journal there, sir. That is first point. Second point, I got a submission to make in case through IDS it can go to the, especially to the Army and Military Secretary branch. The tenure of the Army component, which is 52% there, is 3 years as per the contract, where the tenure of the paramilitary, which is 48% there, is 5 to 7 years. And both the group commander, incidentally, both of them are here, sir, you can take their views. They are fighting with their training portion because it takes about a year, 9 months to 1 year to put one chap operational. And we in army, especially officer, we start pulling them out after 2 years and Jawans maximum 3 years. If this point could be conveyed to the army headquarters, MS branch, that we should also consider this point of keeping them at least for 5 years there. Thank you.
Okay, talking about your second point first, before I hand over the mic to General Sabharwal. This is something which is army specific, but yes, I think we can definitely take up this point. And certainly, I think the period of training one person in the special forces is much more than what you're really saying. I think it is close to about 2 years. And if the tenure is 3 years, yes, I think it needs to definitely relook at. For the first question, I will definitely hand over to the General Sabharwal.
Now, gentlemen, what I mean is the overall boss of NSG, as I know, is not an army officer. The two groups which go and carry out anti-hijacking and anti-terrorist are commanded by the colonels, and they're very well officered. I went and met them both during Bombay attack. I spent about 1 day with them and talked to each and every man there. My personal assessment was the overall in charge of that whole organization, if that is not a professional soldier, he cannot motivate, cannot train, cannot look after the groups which are meant for anti-hijacking and countering terrorism.
My name is Bharat Karnad, Center for Policy Research. General Leader, I think it's a feasible solution that you suggest of putting the SF under the Prime Minister's in the PMO, with NSA as heading it. But again, you talked about in peacetime, the control or command reverts to the COAC. Now the problem is that if in the modern era, the lines are blurred between peace and wartime, what do you do about the transition? In other words, you have to have a more permanent solution than what you suggest. The transition cannot happen unless you begin defining the thresholds wherein peacetime becomes wartime and the control goes to the NSA or reverts back to the COAC. Unless you work that out, that's why I think there's the complication. We earlier talked about it. Unless you have a Special Forces Command, I think you're going to end up with this kind of, a blurred authority, with no one being quite sure who's in control.
Sure. You have to have a Special Forces Command, and that's what I had tried to imply when I said that if you're going to remain in the tactical battle space and the operational battle space, our present method of decentralizing our force to theater commanders is adequate. But the whole game starts changing when you get down to your areas of interest, which include entire countries, and goes beyond the region. At that time, this is woefully inadequate, it's inappropriate, and therefore we have to restructure ourselves to be able to carry that out. Now, since the trend of what's happening in the world is toward the lower end of the spectrum, it is in that spectrum that most of the tasks will germinate. And that's also a political space. And therefore, responses have to be indicated politically for the special forces to act. Firstly, extraterritorially, and secondly, into those domains where they have not been permitted so far. So if you set up a command which is high enough, the way the other countries have done, then I feel that as far as the SF is concerned, every bit of support can be garnered for them. And why do I speak of the NSA? It's for this reason that if you're going to, in peacetime, have politico-military tasks, then it is best that the activity be handled by politicians, and the military aspects come from a senior enough command headquarters. Now, in wartime, And when I talk of war, I'm not talking of the sub-conventional war. I'm talking of the conventional and the nuclear aspects. Now, when you migrate into that domain, that is the domain when this command must start responding to conventional forces and nuclear forces. And that is why the entire center of gravity must shift out from the NSA and go to the COC, which for want of a CDS would actually be sitting in to control operation. That's the thought that I had. Surely there are different models. Prakash has thrown up 3 models. But each one of them point to the fact that you have to have a link up with the NSA. We have choices, Cabinet Secretary versus the NSA. I have found the NSA more appropriate. Minister of State, he has a mandate to cut across all domains. He has direct access to the Prime Minister. And that is why I recommended that, like the SFC, if we were to get the Special Forces Command under him, it may help us move.